I think there's a point in everybody's life where they want to relive their childhood. Now, that's what some people may call a midlife crisis, but given the past year and this year so far, I think 20-somethings like myself are longing for that experience again. Of course, it's not possible. Time travel doesn't exist, and yeah, there's technically nothing stopping me from eating some cereal and watching Rugrats every morning. But after a while, that cereal is going to take a toll on my body, and I can't exactly prioritize watching cartoons in the morning when I have more pressing adult matters to tend to. Like attending school, working on schoolwork, and realizing how much that school is putting me in. Oh, and taking out the trash. However, there's one thing out there you can do to perfectly recapture your childhood, and you can work your busy adult schedule around, and that's playing old video games you grew up on. Of course, it should go without saying that you have to grow up a certified bona fide gamer to even relive such memories. And once again, I would like to clarify that I'm and if you've been watching the channel for a while now, you know what I'm about to say, so say it with me now. Greasy gamer at heart. But those who did not grow up playing video games, please just leave us virgins alone. Now, some of you will simply just dig up your old consoles and games and have yourself a grand old time playing Super Mario 64, while also realizing how shitty the camera is in that game. But I assume most of you either no longer have your childhood console or your childhood games, or both. I mean, it's natural after all. I feel like most people either have a brief falling out with video games or just completely move on, aka becoming functioning members of society. So in those instances, you probably sold such items or even gave them away. I mean, hell, you probably sold some games when you were a kid even. Because when you're a kid, you got Christmas money and birthday money, and that's it. You spend that all up, and the only way to get more money is by selling some games. And video games to kids are very fast fleeting. Beat a game and move on to the next. Unless that game has a multiplayer component, of course. But whatever, it's the 21st century and the internet exists. And it's good now. So you can just buy any of your childhood games off sites like, hey yo, what the fuck? Bro, chill with these prices. Is it really that expensive now? Nah, that was a bestseller. Why is it so pricey? Nah, fuck this. No, I can't afford any of that shit. So yeah, shit be expensive now. I mean, don't get me wrong, I get games that never sold well in the first place. That makes sense, but Double Dash? That was one of the best-selling games on the GameCube. Why am I paying goddamn near $100 for this game? Disc only nonetheless. Well, it's actually a simple answer. Nostalgia sells. This inflation in video game prices will happen to any console generation when their old primary user base reaches a point in their life where they can look back and feel nostalgic. I would say from the early to mid 2010s, you would see Super Nintendo games starting to fetch high prices. And I'm not just talking RPGs or more specifically the fabled Earthbound, because those games never sold all too well in the States when they first came out, so they've always notoriously went for high prices. But I'm talking well-selling classics like Super Mario Kart, A Link to the Past, and Donkey Kong Country. All of a sudden we're going for double or even triple the prices they were going for just a couple of years previously. I mean, it makes sense because people who grew up on the Super Nintendo were now in their mid-20s to mid-30s in the mid-2010s, and those people wanted to recapture their childhood. And I mean, I saw the same thing happen recently with Nintendo 64 games, as those prices also went up from the mid-2010s to late 2010s. Now, it's not all doom and gloom, as those prices never stick. Because once the initial wave of people wanting to get their nostalgia shot dies down, the prices start to lower too. However, they're never as low as they were before. Let me explain. Let's say GoldenEye goes for around $20. When that nostalgia wave comes, the price peaks at $60. Then it starts to die down and the game is stuck at $40, with little fluctuations here and there. It kinda sucks. But now in the present day, my generation is longing for the days of the GameCube, and thus, this should be ridiculously expensive now. But if we learned anything from these patterns, we know these prices aren't going to stay like this forever. And we can also predict that within 5 years or so, Wii games are probably going to go for some dummy prices, so stock up while you can, I guess. However, what's interesting about the recent GameCube prices is that I have reason to believe not all is solely based on nostalgia. Take Melee for example. Yes, we all grew up with it. If you had a GameCube growing up, you legally had to have a copy of Melee. But more importantly, the competitive scene surrounding Melee blew up after it was a main event in EVO in 2013, which coincidentally is when you can start to see the price of Melee melee increase as well. Also, games that are considered cult classics will always notoriously cost more, simply because people that comprise that certain fanbase are usually really dedicated to that game and thus will always kind of buy the game no matter what the cost is. The most prominent example I can think of is Earthbound. Yes, I know that game did not sell well, but it also doesn't have to be this fucking pricey. But the fanbase is devoutly dedicated to this game and this series. Plus, there are only 3 entries in the Earthbound series, and 2 of which have never been physically released in America. That, coupled with there not being a lot of official merchandise for the series, pretty much equates them to buying the English Super Nintendo copy for however much money, no matter what. And for the record, I'm not dunking on Earthbound fans, I'm simply explaining their plight and why the game is so expensive. Now, if you've been an astute watcher, you would have noticed I've only mentioned Nintendo games, and simply put, they're the only ones that are expensive. Honestly. Genesis, Saturn, Dreamcast, PS1, PS2, and OG Xbox have pretty cheap and fair prices for their games. And I'm talking about the heavy hitters too. I'm talking your Sonics, your Crazy Taxis, your Crash Bandicoots, your Gods of Wars, and your Halos. I mean, don't get me wrong, you'll find expensive games here and there, but it's far and few between when compared to Nintendo game listings. Now, what does that mean though? Does that mean Nintendo makes better games? More nostalgic games? Of course not. But I'll put it like this. If I wanted to play Jet Set Radio, a game that is fairly expensive to get on Dreamcast, I would go on Steam and buy it for $8. If I wanted to play Paper Mario and the Thousand Year Door, I would have to buy the original game, which hovers around $100. I'm sure you guys have heard it all before on how Nintendo is infamously bad at re-releasing their games, at least in recent years, and specifically GameCube games. So because of all that, it really only leaves people with one pricey solution. Or they could just emulate it, you know? It's funny to me the connotation emulation has taken on over the years, because I would say in the mid-2000s, it was generally frowned upon. But now, fucking grip it and rip it, dude. Oh, but wait! Nintendo is also against emulation and is actively shutting down and suing emulation sites. But what they don't get is that people are only turning to emulation because it's so hard to play their games on modern consoles. And hell, if they just re-release them, people are more than willing to pay money for that. I mean, look at 3D All-Stars. It's 3 ROMs hastily put together, priced at $60, and people still ate that up. I mean, I guess they had to. That had an expiration date after all, but you know, whatever. We're not talking about that today. I mean, I'll put it like this. You could easily get digital versions of old OG Xbox games, PS1 and PS2, Dreamcast and Genesis, but you can't do that with Nintendo. And when you have a copy of a game in which there's only one way to play said game, then you can put whatever price you want on it, and thus why these games are so expensive now. Like, please. I just want to play F-Zero GX again without breaking the bank.